As the candles flicker, a new tradition shines. 8 nights of Hanukkah, 8 nights of winning insights.
They may come out slow, so you might be able to get a better number. Wow, they're favored.
With SportsGrid, every night is another chance to win.
No pick sixes today, they cover. So let's crunch it up. Let's make it happen. Let's give you our favorite props.
Let your Hanukkah winnings brighten your celebrations. Happy Hanukkah from all of us at SportsGrid.
How do you find some of this great talent that you've brought in, who are still early in their career, might not have a ton of tape on them yet?
I've been around this business, man, for almost 20 years. So a lot of these guys will tell you that I popped into a lot of gyms, sparred, or just worked on the side, or, kind of worked out, just watching. I've always loved this sport, man. I think it's the greatest. And we want to continue to put on the next up-and-coming superstars. We know we got them.
Only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
We welcome you to hour number 3, our third and final, not only of this Tuesday, but can you believe it? A full year on the early line. It is our last hour of TEL in 2024. Who better to bring it and ring it in than Joe Ranieri, that guy right there, and myself, Ben Stevens. What better way to end out a calendar year than with a ton of college football and college basketball on this New Year's Eve Tuesday. We've got 5 bowl games that includes the start of the quarterfinal round of the college football playoff, the Fiesta Bowl tonight between Boise State and Penn State. We'll get your thoughts on that in just a few moments. We'll look at our CFP triple header tomorrow on New Year's Day to kick off 2025. We'll have Jon Rothstein join us later in this third and final hour for an assessment of the college basketball slate on this Tuesday. Big 12 openers across the board and a couple of Big East battles early on in conference action. So much to get to, Joe Ranieri, here in this third and final hour of 2024.
A little something for everyone here, Ben, coming up as we say goodbye to 2024. And, yeah, let's not forget college hoops, big part of what's happening as we turn the calendar.
There is no doubt about it. And, Joe, college basketball will be a big portion starting in 2025, even on this final day of the year. Conference action really picks up. And I know a lot of people love those non-conference early season tournaments, but for some that are perhaps a tad more casual, you want to focus on good teams versus good teams. We will get that night in, night out in conference action in college basketball. And we'll still get that during bowl season. And certainly we hope in the quarterfinal round of the college football playoff that begins tonight out in Arizona. It's the Fiesta Bowl between the champions of the Mountain West, the 3 seed in Boise State, and the 6 seed in Penn State. But that higher seed is not the favorite. In fact, it's the Nittany Lions laying double digits. So how do we approach betting the Fiesta Bowl? We wanted to hear from all of you. It's time now for Fade the Public. The start of the first game of the quarterfinal round in the first ever 12-team college football playoff. What is the best bet for the final football game in 2024? Tonight's quarterfinal matchup between Penn State and Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl. Is it the Nittany Lions as now an 11.5-point favorite? Is it Boise State as the double-digit underdog in a familiar and comfortable setting at the Fiesta Bowl for the Broncos? Is it the over 53.5, or might we stay under that number of 53 and a hook? Most of the public backing the Broncos as a double-digit dog. Boise State plus 11.5 at 35%. But, Joe, in the early returns of this voting, we're closing in on 200 votes here on this Tuesday morning, but in the first 75 to 100, it was all Boise State. 56% of the vote back in the Broncos as the dog. We have seen more Penn State love throughout this morning. How are you approaching the Fiesta Bowl? Are you fading the public?
Yeah, unfortunately, I am fading the public here, Ben, because I do think there are levels to this, and much like SMU learned, Boise State is going to learn. They are not on the same level as a Penn State in college football. Heck of a season, doesn't take away from anything that they've accomplished, but when you want to talk about strength of schedule, when you want to talk about the wins and who they've played, it's not even close here, Ben. The quality of the Mountain West, not exactly the same quality as the Big Ten delivers here. And I think Penn State, much like SMU, they will learn rather quickly in this game that, yes, when things can go off the rails, they go off quickly. And Penn State, I think, will win this game rather easily. And I hope Boise State has some success, Ben, because I do need this thing to fly over the total as well.
I do think that is a really strong look, Joe. Of that total of 53.5, Penn State, of course, stayed under in its opening round game against SMU because that defense was dominant and scored 14 points as well, with two of those opening half pick sixes against the Mustangs. But Penn State in its final four Big Ten games, all to the over. In fact, Penn State's offense in its first five Big Ten games, averaging just slightly better than 24 points per game. In its final five, including the Big Ten title game against Oregon, and if you add in that opening round game in State College against the Stangs, Penn State is averaging better than 38 points per game. The offense has been so much better. Of course, 14 of the 38 against SMU was scored by the defense. Dominic DeLuca, two of those opening three first-half picks, and Tony Rojas, an INT return for a touchdown against Kevin Jennings and the Mustangs as well. Boise State started this year, Joe, playing to the over in 5 consecutive games. They have gone under much more frequently down the tail end of their season. But you might be thinking, well, Boise State in its first 5 games were playing a lot of non-conference matchups. You are correct, including the game against Oregon, the only game for the Broncos as a dog this year, also getting double digits, not just double digits, but 18.5 points when they covered against the Ducks, losing by only a last-second field goal, 37-34. And I want to make a point here, Joe, that I think was maybe slightly lost in the opening round. Often from the betting perspective, from that handicapping outlook, when you think about an underdog, especially a double-digit underdog, keeping a game close and trying to stay within margin, the natural thought, it's just simple arithmetic, is that if you are going to cover a number as a hefty dog, the total must stay under, right? Just follow me here. If there is a lack of available points, if there's only 30 points in a game, the chance for Penn State to cover by 12 plus is much more limited than if there's 70 points and Penn State scores 40, right? Because that would mean Boise State is struggling to keep pace. I find it the complete opposite here in college football in these lopsided matchups that we have seen, as we saw with SMU and Indiana against Notre Dame. The underdog's best chance of covering is to push the game to an over, because the Broncos need to score offensively against one of the best defenses in the sport, led by Tom Allen there in State College, to keep this game close. If Ashton Genty, Maddox Madsen, and Boise State's offense can get to the 20s, that is their best chance of covering the number and maybe pulling off the outright upset against the Penn Staters tonight.
Yeah, and keep in mind, I mean, while that game went under against SMU, it was at Happy Valley in less than ideal conditions. That will not be a problem in this game tonight. So I agree with you. I think Boise State, who did have some success against that Oregon defense, be it very early in the season here until, of course, Oregon figured some things out. But absolutely a possibility here. And Penn State, with how they've been, you bring in the offensive coordinator from Kansas, and boy, oh boy, 38 points on average over the last 4 games. I can absolutely see Penn State putting up close enough to that. The question is, do we think Boise State's got enough in the tank to be able to go toe for a little while and get this thing over? I think you do.
There is a reason, by the way, that Penn State is sensational in games they are expected to win. Where they fall flat is as an underdog. We can have that conversation perhaps in the semifinal round. But as a favorite, 40 games since the start of 2022, Penn State is one of 5 FBS programs that has won double-digit games each of the last 3 seasons. So in that span, they have been booked as a favorite 34 times in 40 total games. They are 33-1 straight up in 24-9-1 against the spread. Both the best win in cover percentage as a favorite among power conference programs. More from the college football playoff up next.
In the heart of winter, when nights grow long, we come together under these lights. A team, united by purpose. Fans bound by passion, each holding a small flicker of hope in their hands. At SportsGrid, we believe that even the darkest nights can't dim the unity we share. One team, one stadium, one shining moment. This holiday season, we shine brighter together. Happy Hanukkah from all of us at SportsGrid.
Two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this one? Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
We continue to preview the quarterfinal round of the college football playoff. It starts tonight out in Glendale, Arizona at the Fiesta Bowl between the 3-seed Boise State and the 6-seed Penn State. The Nittany Lions, again, an 11.5-point favorite. Our total stands at 53 and a hook. One final point on this game, just so you see the number. 127.5 is the rushing yards prop of Ashton Genty. He needs 132 yards to break Barry Sanders' single-season rushing yards record that Barry set back at Oklahoma State in 1988. in only 11 games. This is game number 14 this season for Genty and the Broncos. Just something to pay attention to. And Joe, Penn State ended out the year as a top 10 rushing defense in the sport, only allowing 103 yards per game. And somehow, some way, they got even better in that opening round matchup against SMU, allowing just 58 yards on 36 carries. Brashard Smith is not Ashton Genty. That's SMU's running back, but he's not bad. All to say, Penn State's front is elite. That's how Boise State keeps this game close, though. If Ashton Genty makes history in the offense, looks the part tonight against Penn State's defense. Now, let's go to our final quarterfinal game, our last of 3 on a triple-header New Year's Day slate starting tomorrow. We go in reverse chronological order because we go to the heavyweight bouts to end things out. It's the 2-seed Georgia, the champions of the SEC, the 7-seed Notre Dame. And now, on the FanDuel Sportsbook, it is a basic pick'em. When you look at these numbers, Georgia is still a slight 1.5 favorite. The updated odds on the money line, minus 111 in slight favor of UGA, but it's minus 108 on the other side for the Fighting Irish. It is our lowest total of the quarterfinal round in a college football playoff, 45 and a hook. Joe, how do you break down the Sugar Bowl in the Big Easy between Georgia and Notre Dame?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because even at a close to pick 'em price there, Ben, we're also looking at one of the lowest totals, right? 45, 45 and a half is what we're looking at here. And I got to tell you, it wasn't the final score was very indicative of Notre Dame easily handling Indiana. But the thing I looked at was Notre Dame ran for 193 yards in that game, but 98 of those came on one touchdown run by Jeremiah Love. So 34 other attempts, and they barely totaled 95 yards. 2.8 yards per carry. That ain't going to work. And we know Indiana was very good against the run, although lesser competition. But Georgia is going to make sure they stop the run, which means Notre Dame's success is going to ride on their arm of Riley Leonard here. He was not asked to do a lot through the air this season. In fact, I think 326 total pass attempts is all he had this year. I think Georgia is going to force him to have to be the guy that beats him. Look at his passing yard prop, 175 and a half yards. This game is this low of a total for a reason. And if we're being honest, I think this number is too high. Between these two defenses, backup quarterback and Gunnar Stockton, and it's going to be who in the trenches can run the ball better. Whoever does is going to win this game. I still think Notre Dame's the better rushing team, and I think that is what's going to win them this game, and the under hits as well.
6 of the last 8 for Riley Leonard. He has gone over this number of 175 and a half. But his season high is not 330. It's 229 against a putrid Stanford defense trying to defend the pass as well. He had 3 passing touchdowns in that game. Joe, you are correct. Riley Leonard is going to be key. But so too are his legs, the legs of Jeremiah Love, the legs of Jadarian Price as well. Why do I say that? Because Georgia is the worst rushing defense we have seen in Athens this year since 2018. They allow 128 rushing yards per game. Perhaps you could look at things from 2 different lenses, if you will. Georgia at its best is what we saw against Texas in each of those 2 matchups, in the regular season and the SEC championship game. Or are those games the outliers? It's been an interesting season for the Georgia Bulldogs. 13 games. They have beaten 4 ranked teams, all that have played in the college football playoff. In those games, against the best competition, against the competition they will need to beat once again to win a 3rd national championship in the last 4 years, Georgia is perfect. 4-0 straight up, 4-0 against the spread. Against the other 9 teams on the docket, not a single cover for UGA this season. And Joe, they only allowed 60 total rushing yards. Total in 2 games against Texas. 55 attempts for the Longhorns, 1.1 yard per carry. That was it. But Notre Dame is a better rushing offense than that of Texas, 10th best in the country, averaging 222 yards per game. But injuries, a story entering the Sugar Bowl as well. We'll talk about Carson Beck not playing in the college football playoff and what we can anticipate out of Gunnar Stockton, but also for Notre Dame. Jeremiah Love has not been a full 100% despite 98 yards on the ground and that break-off touchdown early against Indiana. And Riley Mills, one of the better defensive linemen in the sport, injured in the opening round matchup against IU, will miss the remainder of the CFP for the Fighting Irish. Now let's get to Georgia. Gunnar Stockton is the starter. It is his first career start for UGA. Outside of the second half in the SEC title game against Texas, only 2 other appearances this season, Joe, against UMass and Tennessee Tech. Against the third best passing defense in the country, what can we anticipate out of Gunnar Stockton against Notre Dame in the Sugar Bowl?
I don't know, Ben. I mean, not much is known about him. He's had a total of 62 dropbacks in his college career, and 20 of those came against Texas in the SEC championship. So he completed 12 passes for a little over, about 4.5 yards per attempt. He did throw an interception that almost cost him the game. So they're not exactly a great, efficient running team. He's going to have to make plays, and that's whether or not you trust him or not to put your money on him, because it's going to come down to him making some plays in this game.
Yep, no doubt it will. He is the biggest X factor for the Sugar Bowl and the college football playoff. The granddaddy of them all. Next.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the game starts so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
The 2 guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this one?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
A New Year's Day triple header in the college football playoff. Exactly how it should be. Every new year should start with a day chock full of college football games, especially those that are significant now in the quarterfinal round of the CFP. And every New Year's Day should feature the granddaddy of them all. Under the San Gabriel Mountains in Pasadena, California, it's the Rose Bowl between number 1 Oregon in number 8, Ohio State. The top team, the only undefeated FBS program this season, the 13-0 Oregon Ducks, the champions of the Big Ten in Oregon's first year in the conference, now take on, once again, in league in a quarterfinal in the college football playoff. The rematch of an outstanding game, one of the best games of this college football regular season back in October at Oregon, inside Autzen Stadium, where Will Howard slid just a tad too late, and the Ducks handed Ohio State a 1-point defeat, 32-31. Oregon winning outright as a home 3.5-point underdog. They're still getting points in this matchup against Ohio State, but now fewer than a field goal at 2.5. Joe, a 1-point game in game number 1 between the Buckeyes and the Ducks. How many points will game number 2 at the Rose Bowl be decided by?
It would be very difficult to sit here and be like, oh, yeah, I'm going to sweat out an under in this game. Listen, we already saw this game in Oregon and earlier in the year, and Oregon averaged over close to 7.5 yards a play in that game. And you know what? Ohio State offensively wasn't that far behind there. There were a couple of turnovers by the Buckeyes. I think Judkins fumbled at one point early in that game. Yeah. So they ended up giving Oregon a couple of extra possessions in which they made count against Ohio State. I mean, all things being equal, I don't know that we're going to get anything different than what we got in the first game here. Ohio State, arguably the best defense in college football right now, certainly statistically. Yeah. Their defense is better than Oregon State's. However, Dylan Gabriel, advantage him over. I'm not taking anything away from what Ohio State did against Tennessee. I thought that was great. They came out, punched them in the mouth, and the rest was history here. But if Ohio State's going to win this game, they've got to win it on the back of their defense here. So I think if you think Ohio State wins, lay it, no problem. But I would also then fade the Oregon team total because it's the defense that has to have the day in order to beat Dylan Gabriel in this Oregon offense. Still think it goes over, but I would fade one of the team totals here depending on who you think wins this game.
54.5 was the total for the original game, 32-31. The Ducks victorious over that number. Oregon outright as an underdog. The only time the Ducks were a dog all year long. In fact, in the now 3 years with Dan Lanning in Eugene, Oregon's only been a dog 4 times. They're not great. The only outright victory against these Ohio State Buckeyes back in October. In fact, Joe, when you think about the over in this matchup, Oregon has been less than a 21-point favorite 7 games this year. They have gone over that number 6 of 7 times in those games, going over the pregame total 6 of 7 times. In the 3 matchups, the Ducks have played against college football playoff teams over in every one. Boise State, Ohio State, Penn State in the Big Ten championship game. Ohio State has played 4 college football playoff teams. Over in 3 of 4, the only under in Happy Valley against the Nittany Lions back in the regular season. And Joe, to your point about Jim Knowles' defense, Ohio State allowed 32 points against Oregon. They gave up 116 total points in their other 11 football games, now make it 12 with Tennessee the remainder of this season. They are allowing fewer than 10 points per game in the 12 games not against Will Stein and this Oregon offense. All these things to pay attention to for the granddaddy of them all. We'll look at the props for the Rose Bowl on the other side of the break and the Peach Bowl in Atlanta that begins our triple header of the college football playoff on New Year's Day up next.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this one? Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
The player props for the Rose Bowl and the granddaddy of them all in the college football playoff quarterfinal round, Oregon and Ohio State. Joe, there was so much offense. The first time these two teams met up back in Eugene in early October. In fact, here's how much offense we saw. 963 total yards between the two sides in 63 total points. 32-31, the victory for the Ducks outright as an underdog. I think you could argue, Joe, and I think it would be a very fair assessment, that it was the best game for either quarterback throughout the entirety of this college football season. Both throwing for more than 320 yards. That's Will Howard for Ohio State and Dylan Gabriel for Oregon. In both, 3 total touchdowns, 2 through the air, 1 utilizing their legs as well. And look how similar the numbers are for tomorrow's Rose Bowl in Pasadena.
Kind of crazy, isn't it, Ben? I mean, it just feels like what we saw is what we are going to get. And the question is, can Ohio State, who had a couple of very costly penalties and 2 turnovers, not to mention a failed onside kick, can they clean that up? Because if they didn't have those things in that game, Ben, chances are Ohio State was the winner of that game, and doesn't really matter. The market is telling you they think they should be the favorite in this game as well. I do worry about Dan Lanning having extra time. He does seem in these spots to have his team ready to go. I don't see a letdown. I definitely think all of those props there, they're all poised for overs across the board, Ben. There's no way around it. Dylan Gabriel, 270, 275. Will Howard is going to have to pass. Trayvon Henderson, by the way, 52.5 rushing yards, feels light given the fact that Oregon's biggest weakness defensively is they can't stop the run. We saw Penn State run all over them. We saw Boise State run all over them. Maybe that's the biggest area of concern for that Oregon defense, in which Henderson can actually take advantage of.
80 and 2 touchdowns for Trayvon Henderson against Tennessee, and the Volunteers' rushing defense much better than that of Oregon. Joe, to your point, the Ducks allowed more than 530 yards to Penn State in that Big Ten title game, nearly 300 of that on the ground. But Ohio State has had some issue against the most elite rush offenses they have seen this year. Jordan James had more than 100 in the opening game against Ohio State back in early October inside Autzen Stadium. It is going to be sensational. That I can guarantee for the Rose Bowl tomorrow in Pasadena at around 4:30 p.m. Eastern time. Later than that, because the game starts at 5 p.m. Eastern time. Around 7:30 p.m. Eastern time, 4:30 p.m. Pacific, out there in California, as the sun starts to set on the first day of 2025 over the San Gabriel Mountains. That is a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
The first game, Joe, is in Atlanta. It's the Peach Bowl between the champions of the Big 12. That's Arizona State, the 4 seed. Last year's champions in the Big 12. And this year's runner-up in the SEC. It's the top at-large team and our national championship favorites entering the quarters. That would be the 5 seed, Texas. As we said earlier, Texas was the largest favorite in the opening round at close, a 13.5-point spread against Clemson. They won by 14. They covered. Texas is the largest favorite in the quarterfinal round, right now a 12.5-point number. Will the game be more competitive than what the odds expect for the first game of 3 tomorrow in the college football playoff quarterfinals?
This game is all about the matchups here right now. And Arizona State, I believe, has a very clear path here, Ben. If they're going to win this game, they're going to have to do it without their leading receiver who's out, and they're going to have to rely on Scatterbo, who was their everything in this game. I think Texas is going to force redshirt freshman Sam Levitt there, the QB. I think they're going to force him to have to beat them over the top. And you had mentioned we're talking about a top 3 or 4 passing defense here in Texas, although they did give up a bunch of yards and points there to Clemson in that last game. But my goodness, they are going to defensively to Sun Devils. They're going to have to pick their poison as well. We've seen the Longhorns have a lot of success on the ground, and that's not going to be good. If that defense is on the field a lot, that's not a good sign for Arizona State. Ultimately, I think that it's just a terrible matchup here for Arizona State. I might even look to fade their team total here and think, yeah, maybe Arizona State a little less success offensively, especially, Ben, what is the layoff factor in for you here?
Right.
What is the factor that they haven't played a game in a while offensively? Does that help or hurt a team like Arizona State? I think that's the interesting part. It would be Texas or pass for me, but I wouldn't at all be opposed to looking at the under in this game as well.
Arizona State is the best rushing defense in the Big 12. They only allow 117.5 yards per game. Texas is better than that. Texas is the best passing defense in the country, the second best scoring defense in the country, the third best total defense in the country. Joe, if this game stays under, Arizona State is going to lose, and by more than 2 touchdowns. Arizona State and Cam Scatterbo, your favorite running back's favorite running back, needs to have the game of his life offensively. There has been a lot of chatter from ASU about how skilled they are. Sam Levitt, the Arizona State quarterback, saying he is out there to prove why he is the best signal caller in this matchup. Cam Scatterbo claiming that nobody in the country can stop him. And to his point, and even a little bit of Sam Levitt's, they might actually have a compelling case, especially for Scatterbo, who in 12 games played this year for the Sun Devils, he has had at least 180 scrimmage yards in 7 of the 12. But, Joe, if he's going to, or if Arizona State is going to stay close, he's over 99.5 rushing yards. Has to be without a shadow of a doubt. You could look at his rushing plus receiving yards prop as well. That is how Arizona State stays in this football game. And even if they stay in the football game, I'm not sure there's an outright upset here as a double-digit dog. The Longhorns are the national championship favorites, and I think we see why with the reason they will show in the Peach Bowl in Atlanta, where, by the way, Texas played in its last game just under a month ago in that SEC championship against Georgia.
Again, there's a very clear path for Arizona State in this one. So the execution has to be there. And I think what Texas has to guard against more than anything else, Ben, is keeping Arizona State in this game because of turnovers or because of, self-inflicted wounds here. And I think that's the biggest thing with Texas. It's always kind of been the biggest thing when they get to this point in the season, right? We saw it last year against Washington. They got to avoid giving Arizona State an opportunity to win this game late. That's why I think you're going to see a full on-court press early and often for Texas in this one.
And when you look at Arizona State, Joe, you have mentioned it. Quinn Ewers has not been fully healthy. The rest after the SEC championship game and now over a week and a half before they will play tomorrow after handling Clemson should be a benefit. But Arizona State's not great at getting after the quarterback. Only 21 sacks this season. They are good up front in slowing down the run. They are not great about pressuring quarterbacks like Quinn Ewers. If he has time to pick that secondary apart, and we know Isaiah Bond is back now for the Longhorns. He did not play in the opening round game against the Tigers. That's going to be very difficult for ASU to manage. Will one of the double-digit games stay within the number? I certainly hope so. Joe Ranieri, this is where we bid you adieu. A very happy new year, my friend. You'll be on Game Time Decisions later. Hardest working man in the SportsGrid. Thank you. More on the early line next.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all. Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this one? Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
For the last day that we can possibly say, this is only December, this is only 2024. Because in the 2024-25 college basketball season, tomorrow we will say this is January and this is 2025. So to help us ring in a new year as we really get underway in conference slates around college basketball, Jon Rothstein is here on this New Year's Eve Tuesday on the Early Line on SportsGrid. Joining us on behalf of the FanDuel Sportsbook, of course, doing some great work with CBS Sports as well. John, a happy holiday, a happy new year to you, my friend. Very glad to have you here on the early line.
Ben, Lashana Tova.
Hey, that is the truth. What is it? Day number 6? Day number 7?
Day number 6.
Of Hanukkah?
Day number 6.
Day number 6. We light those candles continuously as we ring in a new year as well. And John, although we are now into the final day of December throughout this college basketball season, it almost feels like a new year in part because conference action really in full starting to pick up around the country this week and for the first few days of 2025. Big 12 openers last night around the conference and tonight in Lawrence, Kansas, where the Jayhawks will welcome in West Virginia. Big 12 opener for both sides. You can see a double-digit spread, John, in favor of KU. In the opening game of the conference slate for both teams, what do you expect to see?
Well, for Kansas, it needs to be a step towards getting more out of its supporting cast. And look, Bill Self made it really, really clear when Kansas struggled last season that he was not going to go through another year like he had last year. But if you split the atom, Ben, of the transfers that Kansas brought in, the only one that is giving the Jayhawks consistent mileage is Zeke Mayo. All of the other ancillary pieces that Kansas got out of the transfer portal, A.J. Storr, Diggy Coit, all these players, Ryland Griffin as well, are not living up to the billing that they had at their previous schools. Those 3 players that I referenced, Storr, Coit, Griffin, only combining to average 20.6 points per game.
Yeah, and it's been a big story, John, for Kansas in this early going, the preseason number 1 for a second consecutive year. And it will be a big story around the Fog throughout the rest of this season. Kansas in the Big 12. A conference with Bill Self, they have thoroughly dominated for the last 2 decades. But last season, John, 10-8, the record in the conference for KU. Those 8 Big 12 losses, the most for the Jayhawks since the 1988-89 campaign, the last time that Kansas missed the NCAA tournament. So now as we take a look at the season outlook for Kansas, what are the expectations for KU this time around?
The expectations are still to be a contender for the Big 12 regular season title and a high seed in the NCAA tournament, but Kansas needs, as I said, more out of its supporting cast, and that's directly related to me, to A.J. Storr, who we know was the best player on a Wisconsin team last year that earned a very high seed in the NCAA tournament. It's ironic to me because I'm looking at the Big 12, which has been year in, year out, the best conference in college basketball. Right now, from a national perspective, Kansas has not played as well as many thought it would play. And Houston, dare I say it, is a little bit of a sleeper right now under Kelvin Sampson. Houston had close losses to Auburn and Alabama early, also lost a game to San Diego State and Las Vegas. So the best wins for the Cougars are a neutral site win over Notre Dame and a home win over Butler. Last night they won a game at Oklahoma State. But Kansas and Houston, 2 of the bellwether programs in this conference, are really, I don't want to say off the radar, but they're not at the top of the radar.
Let's go from the Big 12, John, to the Big East. A Big East battle tonight in Providence, Rhode Island. The Friars play host to Marquette. Each team has played 2 games so far in Big East Conference action. And Shaka Smart's Golden Eagles, a 6.5-point road favorite tonight against Providence. What is the breakdown for this matchup tonight out in Rhode Island?
Well, when you look at Providence, obviously the ceiling is going to change if we find out that Bryce Hopkins is going to return to action. There is no word from that yet out of the 401. But Amica Mutual Pavilion, to me, Ben, is still one of the great home court advantages that exists in college basketball. So Providence is going to be a very tough out at home, with or without Bryce Hopkins. Beyond that, though, Marquette, despite losing Tyler Kolek, despite losing Oso Ighodaro, is now emerging as one of the model programs in the sport. Cam Jones firmly separating himself as the best guard in college basketball. And Ben, get this, if Cam Jones gets 4 assists today against Providence, he will have tied his total assist total from all of last season. That is an incredible, incredible feat, considering that this game is being played on December 31st. And another thing I want to point out to you, because I know you love good nuggets, this season, in games played against power conference competition and Dayton, Marquette is plus 30 when Stevie Mitchell is on the court.
And that could be an X factor for Shaka Smart and the Golden Eagles, not just today against the Friars, but for the remainder of this Big East Conference slate. As you saw there, plus 175, the number 4 Marquette to win the Big East, a co-favorite currently alongside UConn. John, we got games on this New Year's Eve Tuesday starting at noon Eastern time. NC State, Virginia, and a really robust slate the remainder of the day. Of the games we're about to flash on the screen, which game catches your attention the most?
St. John's against Creighton. Rick Pitino, the Godfather, taking his team to somewhere in Middle America. St. John's, since this new rendition of the Big East began in 13-14, is 1-10 against Creighton in Omaha. But this is a different breed of cattle when it comes to the Red Storm. And Ben, I think you can make the case right now that St. John's is the most undervalued team in college basketball. If the Red Storm had gotten a couple more baskets against Baylor and Georgia, this team would be ranked firmly in the top 10 of the country. St. John's also is doing it without vintage play from Kadari Richmond. I think you can make the case right now that Kadari Richmond has been St. John's 4th best player in its 11-2 start behind R.J. Lewis, Zuby Ejiofor, and Davon Smith. If Richmond starts playing like the Richmond we saw last year at Seton Hall, the ceiling officially changes in Queens. But Ben, you know as well as I do, at least for another couple hours, this is only December.
And a Happy New Year to you, Jon Rothstein. We're on the early line up next.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the game starts so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this one? Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
So many sports on this New Year's Eve Tuesday. We just broke down the college basketball slate for this final day of 2024 with Jon Rothstein, who better to ring in a new year in college hoops with. We'll continue to do the same for college football. Throughout the 3 hours on this show, we got you set for everything you need to know, starting in the quarterfinal round tonight of the college football playoff that begins in the Fiesta Bowl in Glendale, Arizona, between the 3-seed Boise State, the champions out of the Mountain West, against the 6 seed in Penn State. 3 games tomorrow in the college football playoff quarterfinal. A triple header on New Year's Day. There is no better way to start a new year, to start 2025, than a slate of college football. A reminder, what is your theme on this final day of 2024, entering a new year? College football, period. And oh, by the way, a programming note for all of you. The College Football Today crew will help you ring in a new year, bright and early on New Year's Day, 10 a.m. Eastern Time until 1 p.m. to the lead up to the Peach Bowl between Arizona State and Texas. A full 3-hour college football playoff pregame special live on SportsGrid with CFT starting at 10 a.m. Eastern. No better place for me to start off a new year than with all of you here on the Spiz Grizz, alongside Kevin Walsh, Joe Lisi, and our entire fantastic crew. Should be a great day of college football. Will be a great day today. Some appetizers, if you will, hors d'oeuvres until we get to the college football playoff. 5 games in total, 4 in bowl season, 1 officially in the college football playoff. And it starts at noon Eastern. Oh, what a difference 364 days can make. On the very first day of 2024, it was the college football playoff semifinal in the Rose Bowl between Michigan and Alabama. Of course, Michigan winning a thriller in overtime. Nick Saban's final game at the helm of the Crimson Tide, on the path for the Wolverines and Jim Harbaugh to win a national championship. To the final day of 2024, the ReliaQuest Bowl between Alabama and Michigan. I don't mean to laugh, but it's like Rose, R, ReliaQuest. It's just very funny, the distinction there. 15.5-point spread, now north of 2 touchdowns in favor of Alabama. Will the Crimson Tide take the mentality of being the spurned CFP team and say, this is why we should have been in the college football playoff? That's what the odds expect. They also expect to see Jalen Milroe, the Crimson Tide starting quarterback, give it potentially one final run in college football. Milroe hasn't really declared his future in the sport or if he is heading to the NFL draft as of this moment. A lot of key players will play for Alabama, but a lot of key players already in the transfer portal. An offseason already of attrition for Kalen DeBoer from year 1 to year 2. A lot of attrition as well for Michigan. They don't really care, man. Yeah, they were 7-5. Yeah, it wasn't the national championship standard or the Big Ten title standard they had set the previous 3 seasons in Ann Arbor. So what? They beat Ohio State for a 4th consecutive year, and they've got their quarterback of the future in Bryce Underwood next season. I think Alabama rolls in this game. I would also look at the over of 45.5. The Sun Bowl, in one of the great venues in this sport, the rolling hills of El Paso, Texas, is what we are going to see for Washington and Louisville. Louisville will be without a lot of its key players. Tyler Shuck not playing, focusing on the NFL draft. Harrison Bailey makes his first career start for the Cards. Ja'Cory Brooks not there as well. Louisville plagued by opt-outs. Washington not so much. Damon Williams, their talented freshman quarterback, is going to play. Washington has been atrocious away from Husky Stadium. This game is away from Husky Stadium. I think the Huskies might have a shot. We basically have a pick'em in the Sun Bowl. I'll take Washington on the money line. A great game between 2 9-3 teams, both trending upward in this college football season in the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl between South Carolina and Illinois. We talked a lot about the 3-loss SEC teams who had the best chance of being a college football playoff contender. For my money, it was actually South Carolina. But with my money, I'll back the Illini, once a double-digit dog, now getting 9.5 points. Illinois this year, 5-2 against the spread as an underdog. I think we'll see some points in that game. The Texas Bowl, an intriguing line. Baylor's a 3.5-point favorite against LSU, and that line has stayed pretty stout. Just pay attention to it. For one final time, thanks for joining us in 2024 on the Early Line. We'll see you in 2025 on Thursday.